Hey there, I'm Francisco Perez and I'm 22 years old.
I'm Brian Goslin, I'm 28 years old, and we're both students in cyber politics.
Yep, here at Norwich University.
And what we're going to talk a little bit about today is augmented reality. Now, augmented reality is something that's really interesting to us, and particular in the military aspect of it, in the military application. And with technology growing as it is, it just goes ahead and leaps and bounds, it seems like, every year.
So what is augmented reality? Augmented reality is pretty much like virtual training. Like a new hot topic that's coming through is those Google Glasses, things like that, where it's a picture in front of you. So what this does, it allows soldiers and troops to train virtually with a headset on, maybe in a potential, a box that simulates, a tank or a Bradley or different vehicle systems that the Army has. But it pretty much allows soldiers to train virtually in the battlefield.
Now, what we're going to be talking about today a little bit is where the Army is now, because in truth, the military basically grows most technologies. Most technologies that we've seen in history, whether medical or with things like radar, come from wars. The military training is something I've had experience with. I spent 6 years in the Army as a scout, 2 years of which I spent in active combat. And so I got to see the development of augmented reality, when it was used in both training and in combat. And so it's interesting to see from the origins that we're kind of still in the development phase to where we're growing, because Francisco here is currently starting his career.
That's correct, actually. Let me go ahead and get into that a little bit. I'm 22 years old. I'm a freshly commissioned second lieutenant, and I'm getting ready to start my career in the National Guard. And some of the tools and assets that he may have used during training are some of the things that probably used to be, or probably started the movement for a new, future technology that we're going to be dealing with. So maybe the things he saw in his past career, I'll probably want him to see, because it will be far ahead from that. So, or it might be similar.
So today we're going to take you on a little adventure of what the military is using right now to train its soldiers, and what they're going to be using up ahead.
That's correct. So stay tuned.
The U.S. military has turned to augmented reality quite a bit now, and there's a lot of reasons for that. For one, it's a lot cheaper. The military, when it shoots off ammunition to do its training with gasoline, every one will spend $15,000 just to go to the range for a day. They also go to places like the National Training Center, and that's a 30-day training event that will cost a unit around $10 million just to complete that training. And so if we can do that without the soldiers ever having to leave their base, or without ever needing to shoot live rounds, it'll obviously be beneficial to the taxpayers and the military as a whole. So, and also there's less risk. If a soldier is training based on a simulation, but a very realistic simulation, he's getting the same effects as any he would in the real life, but there's less prone to injuries, to those vehicle accidents, to the randomness that can really take away a unit's combat readiness. And also, along with that, there's fewer maintenance issues. Army vehicles transporting people, or any branch of the service, it's a very costly and timely thing to do to upkeep the messages. So it's just something that goes around, and it'd be better for everyone if we can develop these aids. So they're extremely interested. One of the current things that the military uses, it's called the EST. And the EST is basically a laser range, if you will. It has a big screen, and that the soldiers will be shooting weapons that are equipped with, that shoot a laser beam at the screen detects it. And you can do all sorts of situations. You can do shoot, no shoot, which we actually see transferring over to the civilian side of the house with law enforcement. They're using a lot of the military's training now for that. But you can go everywhere from a shoot to no shoot to a full combat experience without ever leaving the room, thanks to augmented reality. There's also, it started with plane simulators that actually move, and the pilots will see all around them, all the windows will be simulated that they're flying, and the plane will be moving so it feels like they're actually flying. And this has been adapted to vehicles. And with the Army, when they adapted it to vehicles, it was a big change, because now the crews could actually train together, so the driver and the commander and the gunner can all be talking and training. And so I'd like to take a little minute and talk about an experience for me. Before my first deployment, obviously I was a little nervous going into a whole other country, a war for the first time. And one of the things we did in the months ahead of time we actually loaded the city, Kandahar, Afghanistan, where we were going to be living, and we loaded that into the computer system. We got in a simulation that was the exact replica of the vehicle we were. I was on the exact replica of the weapon that I was going to be mounted on. And we trained for months. And we were driving through the streets, we're driving through the cities that we were going to be going. And so when I actually got to Afghanistan as a young 22-year-old, first time in the foreign country, so I was really hesitant. But in the same time, we started driving and we left that main airfield to go to our compound. I started recognizing things. I started, hey, that's a mountain range that I've already seen. I know this road, there's a bend up ahead, because I've driven it in simulation quite a few times. And it's just one less thing that a soldier can kind of clear his mind of, and it gives you that sense of peace. So for that, it's just an excellent resource. There's also currently, it's still in the very beginning phases, and Francisco's going to talk about this a little later, what they're coming up with, but there's VR headsets, and they're pretty limiting. They're constrained rather to just one room. But basically, they'll put on a headset and be walking, and even though they're in a completely empty room, to them it looks like they're wherever, out in the woods, in a city. So it's obviously it goes back to the risks thing. It's saving risk, it's easy to go to, and but the problem with it right now is where it sits. Because the vehicle, you don't actually leave vehicles. Even though it may drive, it's easier to simulate. With these personal dismounted VR headsets, it's a lot harder because you're stuck in a room and you kind of have to walk in place. So it's definitely still in the beta phases, but I think it has strong potential, which Francisco is going to be talking about next.
Cool. Back to what Brian was saying earlier about how the technology that he was exposed to wasn't really up to date and was very strict, and it really kind of hindered a soldier in his movement, so it really couldn't simulate combat as much as the new stuff that's coming on today. For example, there's a headset that is now going on at Bullock, which is the officer training course. It is a headset that a soldier mounts on his head, and he carries a weapon, and as he's moving through the terrain or through the forest or his training environment, they're simulating images of helicopters, of enemy vehicles, and it also helps him kind of be familiar and aware of what's going on around him. Okay, so as the soldier's kind of maneuvering through his training environment, he's going to be able to see a tree there, and in that tree, physically, there's no one there, but similar to kind of the Pokemon Go that people use nowadays, through the goggles and his lenses, he's going to see an enemy there, or he'll see a friendly there, or he'll see like an incoming helicopter coming to his location. So as he's actually moving, he can actually move, crawl and do all the things that a soldier might need to do in combat while things are being simulated as he's training. So just how I was speaking a minute ago about the goggles that an infantry soldier can put on, or any type of combat soldier can put on to kind of simulate the battlefield, they're doing similar training for army medics or any military medic. What this does is they have a dummy out in front of them, and they put on these glasses, and then they're able to simulate injuries. So for example, they can have a punctured lung, or they can have a bullet wound to a certain area of the body, and then the medic would have to then treat the wound and it's kind of in the crawl and walk phase. So the extra training, because they're able to simulate these kind of training, these training environments where they have to treat a victim for a certain wound, they get to see it on the virtual reality first, and they're able to kind of react to it and treat it. And kind of what Brian was saying earlier, before his deployment, before he got to the combat zone, he had a sense of reassurance because he was already familiar with the routes and all the things in that city that he was at. So it'll be similar to the medics because they're able to see this person in front of them, and they've already set a certain wound and apply the treatment already because they've already seen it in the virtual reality. So it's a feeling of reassurance because it won't be something that they're not completely unaware of or they've never seen before, but they'll already have in mind what to do and the treatment needed for that certain wound. Now I just talked about how the augmented reality training equipment can be used to train a soldier. It's not only limited to just training soldiers because it can also be applicable in the combat environment, and Brian is about to get into that.
As Francisco just said, it's not limited to training. We actually in the military are using augmented reality quite a bit as it is, and one of the best ways that you can see this, pretty much since Vietnam when the earliest ones were fielded, is the idea of night vision devices. So night vision is basically letting you see the world in a different light. It's letting you see things that you wouldn't other be able to be seen through the use of a device that you wear over your eyes. And so, in my earliest experience, we had what were called PVS 7s, and they were these big, bulky goggles that were heavy, and you clipped them on, and they worked rather well, but they were very tiring, and they were kind of the older generation that were getting phased out. And then you have the 14s, which just covered one eye, and the benefit of that is when you're looking at a screen, you don't have depth perception, and obviously that's a big thing when you're walking through the woods. So the military was kind of looking at a way, and they decided that if they leave one eye open, it might help. And also, if your nods break at some point, you can flip it up, and both your night vision's not screwed up. So in other armies, they might have night vision, but it's not in the same numbers that America has. America trains constantly to fight at night, which is 12 hours of fighting that, and where people aren't alert, sleeping, and it gives us a huge advantage. And one of the newer advances that they do, they're called the PSQ 20s, and they actually allow you to see thermals and not just your night vision. So you're looking through your goggle and you'll see the same green that we've all seen on the news from airstrikes, but it'll also highlight around any warm object, any mammal, mostly person is what you're looking for, and it'll put a little red outline around them on there, and so when you're scanning you can see them really quick. And these are just little tools that kind of help a soldier do his tasks, and it's something that when you're used to, you barely even notice that it's there because you've trained so much with them. It's just something that you're looking through and the information all of a sudden is popping out at you. Another technology that we use is called Blue Force Trackers, or BFTs. And in the earlier stage, they're kind of on the cusp of becoming augmented reality. Right now, they're more of a tool. So it's when I came in initially in the Army back in 2010, they were just a box that was in a truck, and it would kind of show you where your friendlies were, and so you can kind of keep an idea of where people were around you on the map, and show you your GPS. But as time goes on, all of a sudden you have that in a phone, or a phone-sized object, so you can start carrying around, and it's easier to use, and there's more information, and it becomes more user-friendly. And what Francisco is going to talk about a little bit later is the fact that it's going to go over, and hopefully some sort of glass, just like the night vision, to the point where you're looking through and you can see all this information without going. So hopefully the technology just continues to increase that. One of the places where we can see that type of thing happening right now is in pilots' helmets. So fighter pilots will have actually displays on there. When they look around, they can actually see what the radar is seeing and projected on to their visor, and it's going to also put on things like your speed, your fuel level, important things like that they can just really look through. So instead of having to look down at dials, all of a sudden information is right there. And kind of a step beyond that is the AH-64 Apache attack helicopter. The pilots have that same information where they're getting all that display up here, but the gunner actually has his targeting device on over his eye. So his weapon is actually aimed by just looking at things. And when I was a kid, like if you wanted to define the future of augmented reality, it is the guy with the shoulder cannon popping up and the gun just going as the Predator movies. And that's pretty much what the Apache pilots do with the help of this eye focal point. So it'll be curious to see. Francisco's going to talk about how that's going to affect maybe soldiers. We'll have that individual soldiers, not just helicopter pilots, and other technologies. And it's just such an interesting topic to see where we're going to be in a few years.
As Brian was talking earlier about the technology that he got to see while he was in the combat zone and kind of the night vision goggles, let me build up on that. The first thing I'm going to be talking about is called the Q Warrior, which is pretty much a helmet that's been designed where a soldier is able to place it on his head. It's a helmet. Not only does it protect his head from glass or falling or trauma, it also comes down with a lens, kind of like when we grew up. Like Dragon Ball Z was the kind of thing where like this guy had a little retinal thing on his eye and he could see information and analyze things. It's similar. The idea of this helmet coming down on the soldier's head, he's able to not only see things in front of him, he's able to kind of get an overlay of the place around him. For example, Currently, the U.S. military use drones to kind of go over a certain area or a location, and they're able to draw a picture, or paint a picture. And painting this picture, the soldier's not going to have access to that information through the helmet, through his helmet. So as he's as he's moving through tactically through an area, he's able to see what's out in front of him, what the drone is seeing, or maybe what the pilot is seeing, and all this information and technology sync together. So as kind of what he said earlier about the pilot being able to see, like, have capability of his weapon systems through his helmet, now the pilot will be able to kind of tune in to what the soldier on the ground is seeing and kind of paint a picture. So painting, I mean, we're gonna have, like, picture this, an overlay in front of you with everything's green, and then the target building or location that the soldiers need to infiltrate or the bomb needs to be dropped on will be painted red, and it would kind of distinguish itself amongst all the other buildings. And this kind of helps communicate amongst the soldiers in order to kind of get to the objective or destroy whatever they need to do to kind of complete their mission. Now, kind of what I said about the Q Warrior. So this helmet that every soldier is carrying has information. So this information is being projected to him, and he can see where his friendlies are, where the enemies are at, the target location. So what's the risk of having all this technology on the battlefield that every soldier has access to? Well, currently now, some problems that the Army faces is soldiers might be, losing their equipment, misplacement of the equipment. So one of the risks that having this type of technology that we might be seeing in the future is, what if it gets into the wrong hands? Imagine a patrol moving along a village a patrol of soldiers moving along a village. One of the guys leaves his helmet behind, or for some reason one soldier is lost, or something like that, and then it gets in the wrong hands, and maybe an enemy can get a hold of that equipment, and they're able to see where the friendlies are to kind of be in tune and see what the other side is doing. So kind of the questions and what I'm trying to go for here is, what are some of the countermeasures that we're going to be seeing in the future to kind of prevent things like this from happening? Or how is the equipment going to be distributed amongst the soldiers? Now, as I was talking earlier about the risks of this possible technology being used, forget that. Now, let's talk about maybe not moving this helmet or this type of a technology out to the battlefield, but imagine picturing it somewhere in a safe location, like, for example, in a friendly environment. So imagine a base where soldiers are talking, and usually before soldiers go out, there's always a plan. We've all seen the HoloLens and the Google glasses, the type of technology where a person is able to put on these glasses and then see kind of a virtual world in front of them. Now, how does this apply to the military? Okay, so in the Army, soldiers might have similar equipment to come into the combat zone. So what it does is they put on these glasses and they have a table in front of them. This type of table, we're going to have a virtual reality layout of the possible location that they're going to be operating in. So everything that's in front of them, all the moving pieces, the soldiers, where they're located, will all be painted in front of them. And what this does, I'm sure Brian knows and has a lot of experience doing this in his past, is having to set this up now. A lot of soldiers now have to go out of their way and build this type of kind of, that's what I'm looking for, terrain. All right. Soldiers have to go out of their way to use this terrain model to kind of represent the battlefield. That will no longer be a problem. So soldiers, instead of having to put together a terrain model, they're going to be able to move to, it can be utilized to train, to exercise, to rehearse, to kind of get ready for their mission, while the leadership is able to discuss and see the battlefield already ahead of time. And it saves time, efficiency, and money. Now, kind of to wrap it all up and put it together from what I was just talking about, from virtual technology actually applying in the combat zone, that this is some of the stuff that we're allowed to see, stuff that's on the internet that anyone has access to and be able to see. So it kind of raises the question, like, what else are they working on? What are the limits? I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty excited to go see this in the future and see how it's going to apply and how it's going to be able to help soldiers train and be more combat effective while also saving money. And the military and the government does love the idea of saving money. Okay, so we just kind of talked over the new virtual reality technology that's coming to today's Army, and we talked about what we use in what Brian saw in his time in the Army, and what we saw, some of the potential things that I might be seeing in the training environment and in the combat environment. I mean, how do you feel about that? Tell me about it.
I mean, kind of what you're saying earlier about, we don't even know. We just see the tip of the iceberg of what they're actually developing, and it's just such an exciting thought to me to think what's going on, because I've seen the increases we made in 6 years while I was in was just incredible. I mean, these technological advances, I didn't even think that would be going on, and all of a sudden you have these things that he's talking about that have the potential to save lives, and that's something that's very near and dear to my heart. Anything that we can do to make the soldiers' lives a little bit safer and a little more easy to coordinate, and just stop the stupid type of deaths that you see in combat from lack of communication. People don't talk back and forth. The training,
yeah, definitely.
And it's just
I'm
excited.
Yeah, you're excited to see it. Some of the things that I'm looking forward to for sure is kind of how this new technology is, how me as a leader, I'm going to have to adapt and try to apply it. I mean, it's real cool to talk how things going to be, but I'm sure it's going to be an obstacle for soldiers all around to kind of, I mean, when you were in, I'm sure it was kind of weird and different.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that people don't talk about a lot. They talk about this new thing that just came out, but what they don't talk about is how you're going to implement it, and it's a really big thing. I mean,
it's an obstacle. Yeah.
I don't know how many times we make it. Those night vision I was talking about with the thermals, we got those, and we were like, oh, this is going to be a problem solver. But it comes with its own set of things. They're a lot heavier. They were a lot.
Yep.
See, every new technology has a workaround and a break-in period. So it really takes the younger generation to be able to overcome that and kind of accept them with open arms.
Yep.
And also, you're going to have the old NCOs, obviously, you're going to have to deal with that don't like change. They like things done the old way.
Yep.
So it's something that you're going to be having, I'm sure, you're going to encounter all the time.
One thing that really kind of blew my mind, we were talking about earlier about like the night vision goggles and all these things that it blew my mind, because I for one didn't even know, like I didn't even consider night vision goggles being augmented reality. But when I heard you put it all together, I'm like, it all makes sense. And one of the things that we spoke on earlier was like the virtual reality training to simulate, for example, like a tank. How much money does it cost to actually fuel a tank, take it out to the range, and then actually put those rounds down range? I can only imagine how much it costs to fuel it, let alone buy the equipment to fire it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I can't even imagine when it breaks down. You know what I mean? These are all things that cost a lot of money.
Yeah, you have missiles that every missile you fire is $1 million a missile, and you have units, 500 missiles being fired at once. For
those
an
are
hour
all,
of training, while you're spending like, it's unreal.
It's unreal, and that's all the taxpayers' money. So now we're going to be able to take these soldiers into ththese kind of training environment where they're able to get their hands on the equipment and be familiar with it, and then like kind of run the simulations over and over again to kind of have an idea how it's run. So now by the time they get to the range, they don't run the unnecessary risk of not knowing what to do, of possibly breaking something, or how to do in a certain situation. So now they're able to get there, and by the time they get there, there's less time being wasted. And less time wasted is always a good thing to hear for me so far, because I hate hearing we're wasting time doing this, doing that. Now we're going to be able to kind of better manage our time more effectively, train the soldiers more effectively, save more money. It all just seems like it's going on an upward scale, and
it's going to be an exciting 10 years.
Yeah.
But anyway, so thank you for watching our video. I hope we brought to light some things that we were talking about in class. We just really wanted to expand on it because it's so near and dear to our hearts.
Yep.
Hopefully we get you interested as well. So thanks again for watching, and have a great day.
Yep, and look out for technologies that are coming to us.